Sorry to disturb y'all's conversation. We're going to go on and get started on our workshop Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, 5 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. Call to order. Declaration of a quorum, back to six members present. But we'll be back when we reconvene later on. Welcome, everybody. Thank y'all for being here. Item C1, public hearing. We're going to open up our public hearing notice. And we have not had anybody sign up to speak on the public hearing, so we will now close that, which closes item C2, right? Oh yeah, she got to present for, sorry, Heather. Ms. Wilson, come on. Appreciate it.
Mr. Horvick, thank you for giving me the opportunity, Dr. Harkrider and Board of Trustees. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do a public hearing. Of course, we've gone over this several times and we've had several workshops pertaining to the budget. So this is going to be a little bit more condensed. But if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So the things we're going to go over today are just the legally adopted budgets. That's your child nutrition, your debt service, and your general fund. And by law, we're required to adopt these by July 1st, no later than, or we cannot expend anything. Therefore, we can't pay anybody. So that's kind of important that we kind of get this done in June. We'll start with the child nutrition budget, and this is just kind of a highlight. We didn't increase any of the student meals at this time. We did lose some funding on our child nutrition program because we were getting about $500,000 a year for supply chain things from COVID, and we're no longer receiving those funds. So you're going to see a little bit of decrease in revenue. Ms. Goodlet worked really hard to try to decrease her expenditures to meet that revenue. So you'll kind of see that. We'll kind of look at it really closely this year. We're hoping not to have to increase our meal cost, but we haven't done that in many, many, many years. The staff raises that are in this plan are based on Plan F. That does not mean that we have to adopt Plan F. What that means is I've done the worst case scenario that we're looking at, okay? So that's the highest that we're proposing. And so this is what we're looking at here. So child nutrition funds, we're proposing $9,799,684 in revenue and the same amount in expenditures for a balanced budget. So you can really see where there's an increase in, there's a decrease in local revenue, an increase in federal funds. That's typical. And then, of course, we've had to decrease our child nutrition program. The other one there is our water, utilities, and things, and that is a decrease in the budget as well, just based on historical information. Do we have any questions about the child nutrition?
Just a very quick one, because you put change in fund balance on there. Do we keep a fund balance for the child nutrition part of the budget?
Yes, we do.
A similar percentage?
Yes, yes.
Is it included on the big number that we look at?
It is not included on the big number at all. There used to be a 6-month requirement that you can hold over that much in fund balance, and they've decreased that. So we don't have that requirement any longer to spend that down as much. So we do really well there. The positive is through COVID and feeding all kids with federal funds, you get a higher reimbursement rate on feeding a economically disadvantaged child than you do a regular paid child. You get more funding. And so because of that, we were able to have a great fund balance. Does that make sense? All right. So we'll move on to the debt service fund. So with the debt service fund, right now, we're proposing the 23.7 cents. That's what we did the previous school year, and we're hoping to hold it at that rate. That rate is what went to the newspaper at this time. If we have to increase that rate higher, we'll have to go back and put it in the paper again, okay, before we adopt a tax rate. The crazy thing about the debt service right now is the hold harmless. That was from Senate Bill 4, I believe, where we're going from 100,000 to 140,000. There's some other legislation that passed that you can't defease debt, or you can't increase a tax rate high enough to defease debt. Does that make sense? So what they're trying to do is if you increase your tax rate to defease debt, they decrease your hold harmless amount. So you can play with the debt, but you're really kind of stuck there. I know that's really confusing. I looked at it several different ways, and every time I would increase my tax, it would decrease my hold harmless. So we'll kind of monitor that. Once we get our certified numbers, we can really look at that a lot harder, and then we'll probably have an amendment to the budget, okay? There are some other things, and I'm going to go ahead and just show you what this looks like, because the first time I looked at it, I was a little taken back. So our proposed budget is a $2 million deficit in the debt service fund. That totally has to do with timing, because we changed our fiscal year. And so what we're doing right now is we're collecting taxes for a February of 26 and an August of 26 payment. We're expending our expenditures on an August of 2025 payment and February 2026. So what's going on here is our payment in August of 25 is higher than our payment in August of 26. Now, if I increase my tax rate to kind of drop that down, I'll lose my hold harmless. And so you almost have to increase your tax rate more than $3.5 million, which is in hold harmless right now, to get that to do anything. And so we'll continue to monitor that. It's a complete timing issue. So what questions do y'all have? I mean, I know that is extremely confusing.
So, I mean, the 2.1 million that is showing a deficit there, so it is only temporary, but it would come out of our fund balance, the part that is set aside for.
It comes out of fund balance, but that's a great point, because what's going to happen this year is we levy taxes to pay for February and August of 25. So that money, a large fund balance is going to increase in your debt service fund, okay? And then that's to pay your August of 25 payments. Then we're levying this tax to pay our August of 26 taxes. So our fiscal years no longer line up. In addition to that, TEA looks at our debt payments when they're figuring our hold harmless based on February of 26 and August of 26. And our expenditures are on a different time frame. We're changing our fiscal year. Yeah. Well, no, it's happening. Yes, it happened because we changed our fiscal year, but this is something that we're going to face with. If you level your debt out, and once you level your debt out and you're not seeing huge fluctuations, you're not going to see this. But since there's over a $3 million difference between the 2025 and the 2026 payment, we're getting hit here. Okay? Does that make sense? I probably should have just said it like that. Sorry.
Thank you for
confusing
understanding
everyone
these
tonight.
complicated things.
Well,
They're-
no,
they're crazy.
it's fine. It's just when I looked at it the first time, I was like, yes, absolutely. Now it's not going to look well. Or have to do another explanation of why we're putting money in fund balance. That's for sure. Okay, so then here's the general fund. So there's a few things that have happened here. Since we put the paper notice, so when we did our public notice, I gave this to you guys. It was based on current law, okay? However, since then, they've come out with the new compressed rates, which are higher than what they were last fiscal year, okay? So we put it in the paper at 68.22. versus 6969, which is what it is figuring right now based on my preliminary numbers, not my certified numbers, okay? When our certified numbers come out, they're gonna be based on 140,000 homestead exemption versus 100,000 homestead exemption. So to get my preliminary numbers were a lot higher than 5%, but we built everything based on 5% just to try to take into account the change between 100,000 and 140, and I feel pretty comfortable about that. Now, if they come in higher, we're going to be able to compress that tax rate a little bit more because we're not compressing to the floor. And most people in the state have been compressing their tax rate to the floor, but however, the entire state only grew 5.7% in property values was what's being estimated. So our compressions are a lot different this year than they have been in the past. Therefore, it's almost going to take an 11% increase to get you compressed to the floor. So we're probably not going to get there this year. So we're going to be in between there. So right now, we're going to just sit right now until we have our our certified numbers. And then, of course, I have to submit those into TEA, and TEA tells me where I set my tax rate. But what will happen is, if you remember the cups, and I tell you, okay, if I have state funding, then I'm gonna have less local funding, what'll happen is we'll have to do a budget amendment once we have those, because our bucket should be the same. We just might have to decrease tax, increase state revenue, and move some things around like that, okay? Okay, so there's that first hit. We are budgeting a decline in enrollment. We were estimating a 4% going into this school year. Of course, we lost students this school year, plus we anticipate to lose a few more students going into the next school year. So there is a decline in the budget. So if you were looking at House Bill 2 runs and comparing it to what I have, you might think they have a little bit more revenue, but they're anticipating us to have more students than we do because they don't have our actual revenue, our actual PEMS records right just yet to show where we ended this school year. Okay, so then they'll start making some of those adjustments. The staff raises are based again on Plan F. That means that's the highest raise that we have in our runs. So if it's less, that's fine. We can do a budget amendment. And then the revenues and expenditures are budgeted on current interpretation of a House Bill 2. And so we're still looking through everything, and we feel comfortable with what we're presenting, but there's still, TEA is still giving us guidance on what the legislation passed, okay? We had some, as close as last week, we had some guidance come out on the salaries. So we're still working through everything. Any questions?
Two quick things. The .6822 has our eight golden pennies in it,
Yes,
right?
ma'am, it
So
does.
it would be whatever the
Yeah,
floor
it's
is plus the-
6022 and then it's 6169.
And then the 140, I mean, you're saying you're working the calculations in that. Doesn't that have to go officially to the voters? Is that true?
The
or-
140, I don't believe has to.
It's not going to. Okay, I couldn't, somebody,
The
But I thought, well, the-
65,000 has to go to the voters.
okay.
Yeah.
all right.
And the 65,000 is those that are 65 and older.
Got it.
That
All
has
right.
to go to the voters.
Okay, so this is coming. Thank y'all first.
Can you remind me again, when do you get your certified?
July 25th. Okay. All right. So this is really kind of going through. I just wanted to touch real quick based on kind of where our savings were this year to kind of put it back in place. We reestablished staffing models. We just made a few adjustments there, really trying to just to get those classrooms to 22-1 for our elementary, 25-1 for our intermediate, middle school, and high school. That was really our goal there. And so that's where you're seeing a majority of those savings. So of course, we had some increases just for the minutes to cover our minutes and sped. The increase in campus budgets, we increased their budgets by $75,640. Most of that savings came from the central office where we were taking things from central and moving it back to the campuses. We reviewed zero-based budgets. We have some contingencies in here for curriculum. We have some additions for ESSER loss, and then we have some contingencies for, of course, our attendance incentive, and then for a financial software. So those contingencies plus our increase in custodial supplies due to the loss in ESSER comes to about $866,000. Then we had some savings across the board when we look at different departments, just where we could save money per student funding in different departments, as well as just looked at everything. We decreased training in some places. We moved things around. We looked at savings that we could receive based on temps and overtime pay and things like that. So that was about another $799,000 savings. And then, of course, we reduced that $400,000 for departmental budgets. The other thing I want to discuss before we go into the budget is compensation and what we're looking at. Of course, what is built in this budget is House Bill 2 retention on every plan. What we've done is set aside the money for teachers with 2,500 as we understand those to be today for 3 to 4 years. And though those that are 5,000 for classroom teachers, we've got 5+ years that get $5,000. That was based on Texas Education Code 5.001 when the legislation met, when TEA came out with their guidance, they said an 087 teacher is what qualifies for this, which is typically what we know as a classroom teacher. And that's a PEMS code that we'll be submitting into TEA, and that's how we'll receive our funding. The other allotment we receive for staffing is 45 for regular program allotment that can be used on these type positions. The only thing that cannot be used on is administrative. So we can't use any of that additional funding on administration. That funding is about $515,000 for our district. So we have 6 proposed plans, but to make it easy, I've kind of broke it out into 2 plans because the teachers are the same on 3, and then 4 through 6 in a sense. So A through C, and then D, E, and F. So A through C are House Bill 2 raises for classroom teachers based on their experience. So it goes back to House Bill 2. If they have 3 or 4 years, they get the 25. If they have 5 above, they get 5,000. Our district then said that if you are 1 and 2, you get 25 at least. So we kind of made that right for them. It increases a 0-year teacher from 51,750 to 52,250. And then 2,500 for all other employees. And so those are the employees that they're not qualifying as 087 records or classroom teachers. So that's going to be our librarians, our nurses, our dyslexia, ESL, enrichment, our instructional coaches, things like that. This plan would give them the $2,500. Then the other plans, pay families, which is your administrative pay scale, your auxiliary pay scale, and your clerical pay scale, are all based on the following. It would be a 3% midpoint, the 5.8 million, 4% is the 6.4, and 5% is the 6.8. Okay? So that's if you would go with plan A through C. And this is the cost on that plan. Now, there was a little bit of movement on teachers, librarians, and nurses because the first time we looked at it, we did it based on a percentage. But then when we came back and started looking at it further, we just made it all House Bill 2 eligible. Okay? So it moved a little bit on the cost. Here is when you look at D through F, you're looking at $2,500 for your base pay, and that's 1 to 4 years, and $5,000 for any teacher 5 years or older, or over in experience. The beginning teacher pay would move from 51,750 to 52,250. Of course, we would cover the TIA in this the budget as well as any market changes. And again, that 3% would be at 6.1, 4% 6.696, and your 5% would be at $7 million to do a 5% raise. Again, that budget, these are the costs. So if you did the 5% raise for the pay families and then $2,500 for teachers 1 through 4 and teachers 5 and over in experience, it would be the $2.1 million deficit to the budget. That is what is built into the current budget. So I wanted to break it out a little bit. So just what our increases and decreases are. So this is just looking at per object code classification, and you can kind of see where we had increases and decreases across the board. And then further, I wanted to break it down by your local, state, and federal. Of course, once we have our certified numbers, you'll see some movement between the state and local revenue there. The rest is kind of set based on current understanding of House Bill 2. I do want to say that because we could find some other things out that could adjust revenue up or down. If you look at your student-related expenditures, we're up $3.8 million, and then all other expenditures, including your maintenance and operation expenditures, were up $993,000 per this budget. Total expenditures increased $4.8 million. Of course, over $7 million of that would be the 5% raise if that was what was adopted. The other sources, of course, that is our flood at Pebble Creek. We just have a few items that have not come in yet, and so that's a little bit of change from the last time because I need to set some money aside to cover those expenditures in the next school year. That's the little $4,000 there that they just haven't received everything. And so there's your difference. We want to talk about fund balance. And so when you look at this money and you look at the expenditure of the previous budget, we're really close. 39 million is what we would need. We anticipate adding about 6 million to that unassigned fund balance that currently is at 38.5. If we were to add 6 million to the fund balance this school year with the 10-month versus 12-month budget, that would give us about 2 years to be able to reduce the budget to get it under control. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Can you remind me of the increase in salaries? I like that you put a few slides up where you, the expenditure budget showing for between last year and proposed for next year, that 5.4 million. How much of that is, do you know the number of how much was directly funded from House Bill 2? How much is the state how much of that is actually coming from the state, and how much else are we going to have to try to, put in to meet that? Do you happen to know that? I can't.
Yes, so we get 515 for one of the funding, and right now it's sitting about 3.5 million for the other. So
Okay.
you're looking at a little over
About
$4 million.
$4 million of that.
Some of the runs go as high as $4.4 million for additional funding. It's going to depend on those final decisions on what qualifies as a classroom teacher and what doesn't. So that's going to be some of it as well. And then there's another thing out there where they have caught on. I was hoping that they wouldn't, but they have caught on to the fact that some of our teachers, 29, I believe, are funding from federal programs. And so I think they're going to catch us there where they might not give us the funding for those teachers. That's going to be 100% absorbed by our federal grants. And I hate if that's the case, because that just means that that's less money that we can spend out of local funding, and that could hurt us a little. But they have not made a decision on what they're going to do with our federally funded teachers.
So depending on the raise, a little over 3 million, we would be funding. So basically a potential deficit, if you went with Plan F, the 2.1 million deficit would be basically all money given to staff and raises.
There is some, I do want to point out, there are some one-time expenditures in the budget. And so when you look at that 8, there's about $500,000 sitting there, or just one-time expenditures. And I always kind of like to bring that up, because that's something you hope will decrease in the upcoming years.
Are we pretty confident as far as, the House Bill 2 funding that we're going to get based upon the teachers' years of experience?
Yeah. Okay, so there will be some adjustments there, but then it'll be adjustments in the teacher salaries as well. So where we are at this time, because we're adopting a July 1 budget, we have movements in and movements out. And so what will happen is it'll be based on snapshot. So what we turn in on snapshot of years of experience of those teachers, as well as the count of them, is how we'll get our funding, is what they said. So where we are in October. So we'll have a few retired teachers that will be moving out, and younger teachers will be moving in. So there'll be some fluctuations in revenue there, as well as expenditures, if you want to know the truth. Because when you adopt a July 1, we haven't hired everybody, we haven't put them on, we don't know their years of experiences, and so usually you receive a little bit of savings on that, because you've got some of your older teachers with more experience, and then you're hiring some younger ones, and that's going to fluctuate where you are on that scale.
And Josh, we're not making any assumptions. We're going basically off the guidance, like on the coding of the teachers. So we've followed everything. Some districts were going out, instead of putting that additional money for teachers into the pay scale, they were wanting to put it in the stipends, because technically it's an allotment that can go away, so it's not in technical law. And then we received guidance, I think I sent you guys Friday. We had planned on putting it in the scale. The guidance came and said, yes, it had to be in the scale. So we've kind of followed and hadn't made any, we've kind of, I guess, probably more than likely done worst case scenario of how it would impact us financially versus best case.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of Senate bill runs out, and so I've looked at every single one of them. But then I've counted every one of our teachers on each step. So I haven't looked at their guidance in a sense of, just to make sure my number's higher than their number, when you're backing into the numbers, so that we don't get caught anywhere. So hopefully that'll be the case. A lot of the guidance that's still to come is stuff that we really don't have in the House bill runs yet. because they're holding back on how this might affect because they don't know how it'll affect. There's just a couple of them in there where we've got to know how many kids qualify for intervention because they failed the STAR test. You know, that's a number, it's a fluctuation number that we don't have any historical information on, in a sense, financially wise. The other number that's in there is interventions, because we'll get $1,000 per sped intervention, and we're going off of what we anticipate our interventions to be. But, you know, those numbers we'll be pulling in the future and then getting a better idea. But those are still small allotments going into the big picture. The biggest allotments, of course, is your $55 in your basic allotment, your 106 based on enrollment, and then your $55 based on ADA for your additional funding. But like I said, those are such small per student allotments, and those are they're pretty set.
Isn't there some sped money that we won't get till the next year too?
Yes, ma'am.
That could really help us out?
Yes, we will get additional sped money in the next year. However, if you remember when we started talking about this and they were taking that guaranteed yield out, we're going to lose some of that money. It looks like the sped funding is going to be higher than what we're going to lose, but you're not going to see that huge increase. Like if they anticipate us to get $1 million, we're still going to lose a large portion when they held our guaranteed yield and they upfronted our money this year with the full $55 in the basic allotment. And some of the allotments you'll see kind of go up, but if you remember that $55 increase in basic allotment, it'll increase how much money you get in SPED a little bit, how much you get in dyslexia, because it all goes off that formula.
I feel like we've been looking at this for a long time. You've been looking at this a lot, but just from the perspective of those who might be listening and trying to understand, you know, what we're come down to today that we've been looking at for a little while here, we've got a situation where classroom teachers, specific definition of classroom teacher, is going from the state to get these 2,500 or 5,000 if they've reached a certain amount of experience. And we as a district are trying to see how do we bring everybody else into that, and not just those that are on the classroom teacher pay scale, but then our other staff as well. And I think it's just important to note that these three categories, like there's the three columns that you have when you're talking about plans A through C and D through F. You've got classroom teachers, the others who are on the teacher pay scale, and then all other staff. But give us some examples of who are in that all other staff, if you don't mind.
Okay, so are we talking about all other staff for teachers, or are we talking about
No,
all
that
assistant
third
admin?
column where it's 3, 4, or 5%. I just think it's good for clarity for us to understand. We might make assumptions about what that that column is, but could you
Okay.
give us some examples?
Okay, so when you're looking at the different groups here, clerical and professional is all clerical and professional, okay? Auxiliary, when you're looking at auxiliary, so if you're looking at aides and things like that, you're gonna be clerical professional. If you're looking at a secretary, an aide, a LVN, a receptionist, a registrar, an attendance clerk, that's really going to be your category there. Your auxiliary staff are your bus drivers, your custodians, your maintenance guys, your food service cafeteria workers, and employees like that. Your administrative professional staff is your APs, your principals, your counselors, your art facilitators, your nurses, your diacs, your LVNs, your admin here in Central, your gosh, I don't know if I'm missing anybody, but there's a your
any other
director of maintenance, your
Directors, correct.
your director of custodial, you
Right.
know, it's a huge pay family.
Right, and so
it's
I-
all on one pay scale.
Right, I just think it's good for us to point out. We've got a lot of people that are in those categories that don't fall on that teacher, you know, pay scale that we're also talking about trying to give raises to. And so, yeah, I just wanted that to kind of come out into, like, here's what we're talking about on these three different
Coordinators
columns.
are on that, assistant
Yeah.
directors are on that.
I want to remind y'all too, we've got several different categories on the teacher pay scale that aren't part of House Bill 2. So when we gave you the scenarios of the 2,500 and the 5,000, all of those folks that are on that teacher pay scale are getting that number, not just those that qualify. That's where the roughly $3 million we make up to create equity.
That would be the D, E, and F.
Yes, ma'am.
options, Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
that's kinda
something,
what I-
well, it's something we've talked about as a team. We talked about it Friday during the special meeting. You know, in my opinion, there's not one group of employees that's more important than the other. It takes all of us and their role in our district. And so I've never, as a superintendent, proposed different raises for different staff members. Equity is huge. And like I told you then, I think we've got an opportunity to really jump out there and close some of our scales, some of the gaps that we currently have, and continue to make us an attractive option.
Jeff, are we talking, obviously, we're not voting here during this, but are we going to talk about where we're going to land now or during the board meeting? What-
You can discuss now. I mean, if you wanted to, I'd be more comfortable if you're discussing where you are to wait until we got an action item in front of us. You got questions about the plans, I think now's the best time to talk about it. But the, correct. But when we got the action in front of us, I think at that point, probably be more appropriate.
Okay. Back to next steps here. We'll adopt the tax rate in August of 2025 or September. We can adopt it in September. It would be probably the latest time, but then we'll also bring a budget adjustment back in those months as well, in August and September, and just kind of sum everything up once we get some final numbers. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Do we want to close the public hearing too?
Close the public hearing. Sounds good. No one signed up to comment, so we're good there. Item D, no hearing of citizens for the workshop. Brings to item E1, SB 401.
Yeah, we've got a couple items for workshop. These won't take very long. There is a change in Senate Bill 401. Senate Bill 401 dealt with homeschool students being able to participate in UIL activities in public schools. So prior to this year, in 24-25 school year, a school district had to take action as a board to opt in to allowing homeschool students to participate in our UIL activities. There was a change in the 89th legislative session. And so as a district, a board of trustees has to take action by September 1 of 2025 that you opt out of homeschool students participating in UI activities. If a board takes no action by September 1 of 2025, homeschool students are eligible to participate in all of our UIL activities. So I'm putting this before you today. We had some speakers about a year ago about homeschool students being allowed to participate. At that point in time, we really didn't have a lot of discussion on it. I don't think most folks on the board had an appetite for that. So just bringing it to your attention, we will bring this forward at the July meeting for action on Senate Bill 401. Got any questions? We can talk through them right now.
I guess it's important to note, we don't get funded on those kids. We let them participate in our sports, but we're not getting money. I
Correct.
don't think people understand that. They don't understand why we're not
Right,
allowing that.
not necessarily funding for students. You know, I've always had I think we've got a great school district. If our band, choir, football, theater is good enough, then our classroom should be good enough. That's just where I personally sit on it. There's not a lot. I've tried to do a quick search. I've seen a number at one point in time, roughly 50 districts out of the 1,200 in the state had allowed the participation. So it has not been, it was an interesting change because you had to make a decision to allow it to happen, and you had less than, you know, not even a tenth of the districts that had taken that action. So now you've got to opt. It was just it's an interesting change in the law that to me was unnecessary, but it is what it is.
Mine is not near as complicated as Heather's, so thank goodness. Okay, we have 6 policies we will be voting on, not this board meeting, but in July, local policies. First one being, a lot of them are board-related, the BDAA, and that just aligns the district with practices and to clarify board officers that when they serve and how long they serve and that kind of thing. It's very clear in the policy. Then B, any questions about that?
Chris, could I ask just a general question before? I mean, I know obviously the legal stuff we have to do because, the legal policy updates because they're the law, so we have to accept those. So on these local ones, I know usually you're getting some kind of recommendation out of, TASB to make a change. Were all these driven by something coming out of TASB, or are they, some of them just like things that locally we've looked at and want to change, or are they just, what's driving some of the changes, I guess, besides just maybe some cleanup?
It varies. Sometimes we, as a district, decide we want to look at our local policy and change some things. And sometimes it's driven by policy. There are several things in here we were already doing that are now being voted on as local policy. So it just varies. It depends on what it is. But there are times when we decide we want to look at legal and see if we can do something locally a little differently. And then I have to run that through TASB, and they run it through legal, and then they draw it up for me in proper policy, and then I bring it to workshop. And then all districts don't bring it to workshop first. We always bring it to workshop first and let you ponder it and then vote on it the next meeting. But that's kind
This
of been our.
update was not driven by us. If we have an update that's driven by us, we'll bring it to you under separate cover.
Okay, that's kind of what I'm asking. So for these specific,
Correct.
they were kind of just the, I know
Yes.
that, every once in a while we just get recommendations on things that, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I,
Okay, the next one is BDB, and it's, again, local, and it just determines the number and the terms and the responsibility, and it's pretty clear there. Any questions on that one? And then the next one is BDF, and that's separating board committees from citizen committees and really putting much more clarity on when you do them, when you have them. They even changed the title of the policy and separated them. So, and talked about how you can end committees that have citizens on it versus most committees are board committees. So it just separates that. It's pretty clear. Any questions on that? Okay, the next one is the EI local. This is something we already did as a district. This was a local policy we declared a long time ago, and it has to do with partial credit, and if you make a 70 and a 60 and a course, that you get partial credit for the 70, so we've been doing that for a long time, so. Then the next one is FDE, and again, we've done this. It's adding bullying to the safe and civil schools and making sure we're kids, if they have been bullied or they've been a victim of any kind of abuse or sexual abuse, and that person is in the school, you can get a transfer. It's very clear, and that's been clear for a while, and we have had no schools declare unsafe and have not had to deal with this. So that's been there for a while. So then the next one is attendance, FEC, and this is an interesting one for us because we've had attendance committees for years, mostly at the secondary, intermediate, middle, and secondary level, where they're working with absences and whether they get credit if they come enough days. We've always had those committees. The principal has input in it, but they usually have a committee. And then we have to do seat time if they haven't come to school enough. They are releasing us of seat time. Now we can look at whether they've met the TEKS, and there's some beauty in that, and then there's not. So we have, administrators have a mixed view about that, but it's kind of nice, but it also was something that we could hold over people that helped them get some of the things done at the last minute. So, there you go. I was surprised to see that. Then FFAC is about whether we have respiratory distress, which is if we allow kids to have whether we have unassigned inhalers and that kind of thing. We do not, so that won't pertain to us. We do have unassigned EpiPens, and that's already been policy, but this is just looking at kind of the same thing with that with inhalers. So we are not recommending to do that. That's not something we're going to do. If we want it, we have to do something different. So, any questions?
Is the FEC local change, is that a legal requirement or?
It's a local requirement, but there's also a legal requirement with it that we've had in place, partially. Okay.
Yeah, I guess my question is, because you mentioned, kind of the good and the bad of it. Is it something we could not adopt and keep the seat requirements, or?
Yes. Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look into that. I don't know.
Generally, when the recommendations come out with like major updates like this, we need to follow their guidance because the legal guidance is it needs to be updated. And some of these changes sometimes are a result of potential lawsuits, case studies, and then generally it's lacking in a year. And then everybody's playing catch up. So generally, this is trends that they've seen across the state that maybe, pinch the district, put them in a bad spot, and so they recommend the updates. I guess technically, you could say no, but then you're kind of exposing yourself to something that's happened somewhere potentially.
Dang lawyers.
You gotta have the attendance committees though, so those are good.
And it's a little question. So if they aren't required to be in the seats and we have to prove TEKS mastery, is that grades for high school kids? Or, I mean, do we,
The committee can look at all kinds of unique, it's very spelled out in the long side of it. Every situation is unique and the committee is now required to look at every unique situation. The committees already did that.
Right.
So it's kind of funny. I think part of the issue that this came up is because some school districts really weren't doing the committees as, with fidelity, and we've done that for a long time, so. That's my opinion. Yeah, it's always been a problem. Any
Anything else?
questions?
All good? Thank you. That brings us to adjourn.
Fun to begin. Yep. Oh. Yes. Okay.
Welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting, Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, 7 o'clock. Call to order, declaration of a quorum, 6 members present. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the meeting of the College Station Independent School District Board of Trustees. We are elected at large to represent the interests of our community and our state in educating our students. Our mission for our students in this district is success each life, each day, each hour. We adhere to all pertinent laws, policies, and procedures in posting agendas and conducting our meetings. The detailed agenda information was made available to us at least 72 hours in advance. We've all come to this meeting informed and prepared. We've just completed a workshop meeting where we heard reports and discussed much of the information needed to make decisions in either this meeting or in upcoming meetings. This is a meeting of the 7 trustees in a public setting rather than a public meeting. As such, public comment is included on the agenda at a specific time and requires us to listen rather than take action so as to abide by the Open Meetings Act. We are pleased that you have taken the time this evening to join us. We are very proud of this school district and we thank you for your interest in and support of our students. That will bring us to item C, recognitions. And we have the bilingual summer school here tonight. Right ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Maria Saenz, and I am the Summer Language Academy Coordinator. This year we have the great privilege of working with over 150 students. These students are pre-K, Head Start, and kindergarten students this past school year. All of our students currently are representing over 12 different countries that are part of this program. And here's just a select few. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hola, mi nombre es Ivana, tengo 6 años. Hola, me llamo Mía, tengo 5 años. Hola, me llamo Rebeca, tengo 6 años. Please stand. Allegiance to the flag and the United States of America, and to the employer for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one indivisible. Please join me to that moment is Thailand. Thank you. Women seated.
And we want to recognize the artwork at the back of our boardroom from the bilingual summer school and enrichment summer school kids. Quite a bit of artwork from the summer school. So keeping it going through the summer. That'll bring us item D, board reports. I'm not sure, do we have any?
DEIC met remotely, which was very nice. And they basically talked about all the federal programs that we participate in, and they kind of told us how they were going to spend the money. And those programs are the Title I, the low socioeconomic, Title II, professional development, 3 is bilingual, and 4 is safe schools and school education technology. And they allowed for comments, and that was it.
So the intergovernmental committee meeting was yesterday. Dr. Harkrider and I attended, and there was a couple items on the agenda, but the big thing was a presentation from Chris Scotti with Texas A&M Innovation, the Director of Strategic Partnerships. And one of the cool things that potentially could come from that is they seemed open to the idea of potentially doing some work with the local school districts as far as giving our students opportunities to work in the entrepreneur and innovation area through their programs. So that might be something we get to pursue in the future. But yeah, it was an interesting meeting. Not a lot of it applied to us, but it was good.
All good. Dr. Harker, Superintendent update.
Yes, sir. Kind of short and sweet. Thursday will be a district holiday on June the 19th, so we'll be closed that day. A quick HR update. We currently, as of today, have 27 professional positions that are open, 31 paraprofessional positions that are open. To kind of give you some context, at the end of May, we had 78 professional positions, so we went from 78 to 27. And a year ago, at the end of May in 2024, we had 128 professional positions. So significantly less openings this year, which is exciting. Most campuses are staffed up and ready to go for next year already. Tomorrow we'll be funded from our bond sale from a few weeks ago, $189,820,000. And then our last bond sale that will wrap up, the 23 bond will be in June of 26, which will be roughly about $90 million. And then that'll close the books on all of our bond sales. And obviously we've got about 14 or 15 projects going this summer. So a lot going on here for the next 2 years, and then we'll get everything wrapped up.
All right. Brings to item D2, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to school board meeting schedule for 25-26 school year. Mr. Dunson.
Yes, sir. Mr. Horak, members of the board, we've come to our final meeting of the 24-25 school year. And so now it's time to go ahead and schedule those dates for the 25-26 school year. As we've historically done, these will be held on the third Tuesday of each month. And we've looked at again this year that we didn't have to make any adjustments based on our holiday schedule. So you can look at those meeting dates on the memo that was provided in the agenda. Go ahead and mark your calendars. We'll get those published on the CSISD website following this meeting. So it's recommended that the CSISD Board of Trustees approve the third Tuesday of each month as the regularly scheduled workshop and meeting date for the 25-26 school year.
I move to accept as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ben, second by Ms. Ege. Further discussion or comment? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Dudson. We'll move to item E, hearing of citizens. During this time, we will hear from citizens who registered to speak prior to the meeting in accordance with board operating procedures. The Open Meetings Act prevents us from responding to speakers regarding items not on the agenda. Comments related to items on the agenda may be discussed during deliberations on that specific agenda item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Those needing an interpreter may have up to 6 minutes. Each person has one opportunity at the microphone regardless of minutes used. Unused minutes may not be accrued by another speaker. The executive assistant will time the comments, alert the president when time has expired. The board asks that those addressing the board refrain from any derogatory comments. I believe we only have one, Miss Leslie Kurtz. Is she here? No? Okay. Then we will move on to item F, consent agenda. Those items are G, J3 through J23. And that is it.
A motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Ege, second by Ms. Simmons. Further comment or questions? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. That'll bring us to item H1, 24-25 end of year map data. Mr. Mann.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. Dr. Harkrider, Mr. Horak, trustees. It's my pleasure to come to you tonight and share with you some end of the year map growth data. This came in right before the May board meeting, so we didn't want to rush through it. We want to be able to process through it so we could share with you the information that we have. Tonight, I'm going to share it with you in just a little bit different format. Last time was the candlesticks and we want to cover the wick with the candle and all that stuff to talk about growth in the winter. What I want to share with you tonight is by deciles, okay? And so we're going to look at achievement and we're going to look at growth by deciles. And so first I'll kind of break down what that is, then we'll get into the data. So what you see in front of you is the decile components. And so whenever you look up on the screen, you'll see 0, 10, 20, all the way through 90. And so NWEA describes this as, and I love the description. If the school district represented the entire United States of K-12 students, each decile would contain about 10% of the population. And the black line that's there, I kind of brought it up because it's a little hard to see from further back. That black line that you'll see on the graphs represent the 10%. And so a decile band that contains substantially more or less than 10% in each decile is a departure from the norm. So if you think of a normative curve, this is just in a decile format, okay? And so different statisticians, and they'll tell you this with NWEA, will have a different interpretation of what statistically significant different looks like. NWEA recommends anything beyond 2% from the 10% is worth making a note. That's pretty much all they say. It's up to us to look at it. But if you look at where we are, you can see kind of the spread that we have across our district. This graph that you're looking at is all of our map tests with all of our students, okay? And so this is our achievement with where we are within that 10% mark with all of our kids spread across all the deciles, all right? So that's the first graph. And this is just used really for you to kind of see big picture. We're going to break it through each test and look at it by ethnicities.
But before you go on from here, so I mean, this is our data then,
Yes,
right?
this is us.
All students at this point.
Yep.
For achievement. And, because this is a new way to look at it, right?
Yes.
For us. So
Yep.
I make sure I understand all these graphs. And obviously, this is how we would like it to look. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay, I
Yes,
just make
ma'am.
right?
Yep.
Because we want the 70, 80, 90s to be higher than that bar and the other side to be lower.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, I have these highlighted with the orange because they're
More than 10.
beyond the 2%, which is a good thing. And the others are below, and that's good for us because the 0, 10, 20, 30, that's the lower ends of the achievements. So we have fewer kids there than what you would see nationally. And so those are things to highlight in the conversation. And just so you know, like I didn't make these graphs, these all came from NWEA. The campus admin have access to these, so do their instructional coaches, their MTSS coordinators or coaches. And for them, whenever they click on a bar, it actually shows you the kids. Because the data is worthless if we can't get to the kid level. And that's where we take the action. And so obviously for FERPA reasons, I didn't do any of the demonstrations for that. But just know that our campus staff can get to the kid level with every one of these graphs, which is a big deal.
So just to be clear
Yep.
though, like, I just want to make sure, because again, this is a new way for us to look at it.
Mhm.
That's saying on the 90 line that 17.4% of our students are in like the top 10% as opposed to just 10% of our students?
Yes,
If
ma'am.
you, okay.
That's correct. And as a part of our work in CSISD with Goal 2 of elevating academic outcomes for our historically underperforming student groups, we are monitoring by ethnicity. And tonight I broke everything down through that lens because I know that's a big focus for us as a district in our improvement. So looking at ethnicity, this is just, you can see the titles. The top is our Native American, American Indian students, and then our bottom is our Asian students. And so I'm just going to let you just take a moment and look at those, and I'll scroll through the groups. because this is just ethnicity by achievement, or achievement by ethnicity. Our African American students, our Hispanic students, our multi-ethnic students, and then our white students. And so you can see how the graph changes from the 10% line as we go through each one of them. And that's what we look at, is as we look at each different groups of students, what are the changes that we're seeing to draw our attention. Again, this is all test. We're going to get into the specific tests by ethnicity, but these achievement slides are all tests that we just looked at. Okay, we good there so far? Okay. So on the growth side, this is always a big conversation for us. We know we focus on achievement, but we want to know are our kids growing. And so the same thing goes for our growth deciles. And so what you see here is the breakdown, but instead of the 10%, if you think back to the winter, whenever we talked about the 50% or higher, we want to see kids at the 50% or higher mark in what's called the median, right, growth percentile right here. Okay, so that's what this is right here, is marking that 50%. And so our median student growth percentile by initial achievement. So what this means is where the kids scored in the fall determines which decile they're placed in. And then the program tracks how much did they grow to the winter and then to the spring. Okay. This is, I jumped ahead of myself, but this is the 50th percentile that we want to see. And as we go through the slides, you'll see the bars change colors, as you would expect. And so this just shows you the red are students that are in the low end of growth. Okay, so they're in the bottom, the less than 21st percentile, then low average. Average is in the middle, which is about a year's worth of growth, and then high average, and then high growth. And so you'll see these colors as we click through each one. And then the last thing I wanted, and then the last thing I wanted to point out is the top set is the most recent set of data. The bottom set is going to be our winter set of data, because I wanted to look and see how much do we grow from winter to spring, because we just looked at fall to winter.
But the left side is always, the buckets are always going to be based on the fall achievement.
Where
So
they're
they're both
placed on the
comparing,
bars.
they're both comparing to the
To
fall.
where they started in the fall, correct.
Okay, and then comparing
yeah,
that winter, and then comparing
yes,
spring to fall. Thanks.
that's correct. Okay, so this represents all students, all tests, growth. So just as the beginning we had achievement, pass, fail, right? That achievement mindset. This is growth. All students, all tests. So the bottom was where we were at the winter, and the top is where we ended at the end of the year. Okay, and so there's a couple of notes that you can see is where the 50th percentile bar is and where the student lines are. We have more of them beyond it, which is great. And you can see that we had students shift in from the middle into the higher end of average. Not at high, but they're in that higher, that green slot. Okay. And whenever we talked with our NWEA rep, she told us it is not normal for districts to have all of their deciles beyond the 50th percentile mark. That is not something they typically see. That is not an average thing for them to see. Typically, they see more of that distribution of kids beyond on the left side of the bar to the right side. Typically, they see kids that are on the top end, usually more over here, and these kids down here growing. It's not a normal thing for them to see all of them across that.
Yeah, so another way to say, we basically had fairly consistent growth across all of our kids, starting at all the different levels.
That's correct.
Again, in aggregate here.
Yep, that's correct. So it's not a typical thing for them to see that. So that she made it a point to tell us that, which is great. So in looking at our elevation of our academic achievement students of our historically underperforming groups, we're going to dive into, first we're going to look at them by the populations we did a moment ago. So our American Indian, Native American group, and you can see, but what you're going to see is, again, the bottom is the winter, the top is the spring. So you can see the changes within the bars. And the kids, whenever you see the changes go up in colors, those are our lowest achieving kids in their growth. all the way down to our highest achieving kids in their growth. Okay. So our Asian students, and if I go too fast, let me know. Our Hispanic students, and we had more of them cross the 50th percentile, even though we stayed within the same average pace of growth. Our African American students, again, more of them across the 50th percentile, but still stayed within an average pace of growth for most of them. Our multi-ethnic students, and our white students. And again, this was all tests just by ethnicities. Next, we're going to break down math tests and look at the different ethnicities by math. Okay? So math, specific to math, K-8 math, these are the winter scores on the bottom, the spring on the top, all of our students. And then this is how the heat map looks for our ethnicities levels of students for K-8 math. And so the same colors mean the same. It's just showing the percentiles instead of it being at the end of each bar. It's just a little bit easier instead of having a bar graph for each set of kids. But it's a lot to look at and process. The colors are the good indicator. And just like on the bar graphs, we can click on each box and we can get to the exact kids. And so the campus admin and their teams can look at that specific information and see where their kids are. Algebra 1, so you can see the growth from winter to spring. And then you can see it by our ethnicity. Our Algebra 2. And by our ethnicity. Our geometry. Okay, questions on math before we shift into reading?
Just how long have we been doing MAP for those upper grade levels, algebra 2 and geometry?
For all of our EOCs, this is the first year for all of them, I believe. Algebra, Jennifer, did we do this this first year?
This is
Okay,
all new,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of growth on all those, three of
Oh,
those
yeah,
math. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, lots of growth. Yes, and that does all that. This is all of our kids that are in Algebra 1, geometry, no matter the grade they're in. Yeah, so we've got kids that start that very young. So our K-8 reading growth. So again, same orientation, winter's on the bottom, spring's on the top. And you can see we've got all of them across the 50th mark there. And still the year's worth of growth pace for each one of the groups on average. Our Spanish reading. So we've got some work we've got to do with our Spanish reading work. And then you can see by our ethnic breakdowns. And so it's very helpful information for us to be able to get to the student level to break it down as we start to talk about where we are. And these are our Spanish reading students.
Sorry, Mr. Who
Yep.
are, which kids are these? How many are there? I mean, when you say Spanish reading,
Yes, our students
taking,
taking they take the Spanish test and the English test that qualify for both, that take both in our dual language programs. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, our science test. So the winter on the top, or sorry, winter on the bottom, spring on the top. And we just continued on from our great growth we saw in the winter. You can see by our ethnic bands. Our biology. And lots of blue on the bottom end. And what's significant about that is these are our kids in the lowest achievement bands showing tremendous amounts of growth, which is a good thing that we want to see. Yes, sir.
In the winter, if you're 20, that achievement band, spring, you're 20 as well. It's not like you can fluctuate between them.
No, because that's where you started in the fall.
Right.
But, yep,
So you're always gonna be there, and that's how the.
it's measuring the amount of growth that you're in. Yes, that way we can track. Yes, sir. I know it's a lot to process, but it's a good way to look at it from measuring the growth aspect. And so then we see it again. And then this graph is by ethnicity by all of our campuses. And so then we can look at campus by campus and we can see where we are with our different groups because we know that this is a big focus of the work that we have in our improvement plans. And I believe we're getting close to the end. This is by subject and this is by campus. And so breaking it down of just seeing how are we growing by subject by school for us to get a good picture of that. So to sum all of these colorful slides up, right, we're seeing our students grow over the course of the entire year, which is a great thing. And on average, we're seeing more growth from winter to the end of the year than we are from fall to the winter, which would make sense because we're compounding our curriculum, we're working through it, we're digging deeper, and they're understanding the concepts better. And that's what we would want to see. I would be more concerned if it was higher in the fall than at the end of the year in the wintertime. And we are tracking our historically underperforming student groups as a part of our strategic design plan, and we're going to keep digging in. Like we have this data at our fingertips to help us. This is something that as a board that we have set as a goal many years ago, and we keep pushing in on this so that we can work the problem ahead of us. So that's where we are with that. So, questions, comments?
I mean, you know, how y'all use this data, that's why y'all are the education professionals, but just from a perspective of that being one of our goals, and there's obviously room for improvement in particular a couple areas, but overall, I come out from the presentation feeling pretty happy.
Yeah,
We're moving in the right direction.
we are headed in the right direction. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I'm very glad that we are looking at it, that you're sharing it with us and, you know, and everyone, because you need the data to be able to see where you can improve. That's one of the reasons we just approved the money for MAP, which is a nonprofit organization, right? But they help us get this type of information in aggregate, but also down to the student. Yeah, my big takeaway is that yes, we still have at least one particular achievement student group that's lowered on the achievement, but in general there was growth in lots and lots of areas and obviously lots of colors on there, but in general, you know, a lot of good growth, and I think that's what we got to keep working towards. Right?
Absolutely.
So, thanks.
Yep. Okay. All right. You bet.
That'll bring us to I-1, presentation on attendance boundaries, elementary, intermediate, and middle. Miss.
Good evening. Our demographer couldn't be with us tonight, so you guys get me instead. First of all, one thing we do want to point out is these attendance boundary adjustments do not affect high school. And so that's one thing we want to be really, really clear about from the get-go. So we're really looking at K-8 adjustments. These adjustments are really just to closely align the enrollments at each campus for the next 6 years, and that's what we're trying to hone in on. There's one thing that we have to keep in mind when we look at adjustments, and that is our middle school and intermediate school and our board policy FC local, which says that we have to keep our economically disadvantaged students within 10 to 15% percentage points. You're going to see in a little bit the intermediate and the middle school, and when you pull in that dual language campus, it changes that student makeup of that campus, and you can adjust one middle school and then it makes your intermediate fall out or vice versa. But we're getting as close as we possibly can, and we have two options to show you guys tonight. So we'll kind of start out with just the elementary boundary and look at the current view. So you can kind of see the red boundaries around each school, and that is the boundaries for that zone for that elementary school. When we kind of looked at this, we knew we had really kind of three things we had to look at, and that's Pebble Creek, Spring Creek, and Southwood Valley. Those were over capacity or near capacity. And in addition, we've got some campuses that are quite low. For example, Creekview has 640 capacity at that campus. However, they only have currently a little over 400 students. And so we were trying to balance the students, but then also look at future growth and to be able to make sure we have capacity for that growth that's in that school zone. So the first one we're looking at here is the elementary attendance boundary, and this is our first plan that we're going to present. The major changes here are Creekview. You can kind of start looking at Creekview. It's the purplish pink color, I guess. I don't know what really color that. It's kind of in the center of the school boundaries, and it crosses over 6. And so that's really the major change, where you would extend across Highway 6 to include Midtown Reserve area past Prairie River, which is currently the zone within Southwood Elementary. In addition, Plan 1 would take in the area of Prairie Road and north of William D. Fitch Parkway for Pebble Creek. And so you can kind of see those adjustments. That would be moved into Creekview Elementary. Forest Ridge Elementary would include a new Southern Point development, as well as the areas such as the development. So that basically takes it out of Pebble Creek. You can see that in the north part of the map where it crosses over Highway 6, picks up that little area from Pebble Creek and it moves it into Forest Ridge. Then if you go up to the top, you're going to look at South Knoll. It's the dark purple color at the very top of your map. And what we do is have several streets that are east of Welborn that are currently zoned actually all the way to Forest Ridge Elementary. We would take those students and put them into South Knoll Elementary. Spring Creek Elementary would include Spring Creek Townhomes, but then we back out Castlegate 2 and then rezone those to Green Prairie. So those are some of your major adjustments on elementary boundary 1. The one thing that we have to kind of watch is within our 6-year period, that doesn't kind of get Forest Ridge where we need it to be, because it kind of gets them over the capacity, and then it doesn't really increase our numbers a lot for Creekview, but it's an option. Then we can look at Plan 4. So Plan 4, you can look at Creekview again, and we extend over 6. We don't just pick up as much area as we did before. Creekview Elementary, we extend across 6, and then it would just stop at that Prairie Road. So Prairie Road would still stay, past Prairie Road would still stay in Southwood Valley. In addition, between Welborn Road and William D. Fitch, the Southern Trace Drive area, which is currently zoned to Spring Creek Elementary, would go to Creekview. Forest Ridge Elementary would include the new Southern Point addition again, but not as much as the previous slide. And then College Hills Elementary would include the area between Krenek, Tap Road, and Southwest Parkway, which is currently zoned to Creekview. So there's a few adjustments there. If you look at the 5th boundary, yes, I know we had 5 and we've narrowed it down to 3, but if you look at the 5th one, these are some major adjustments to the boundary shifts, but it kind of gives us a really good plan for 5 solid years. Riverbend Elementary would include the areas between Welborn Road and William D. Fitch Parkway, which is the Southern Trace Drive area that's currently zoned to Spring Creek Elementary. So you can kind of see that little jet out there in the corner at the Spring Creek area. That would go to Riverbend. And then in addition, if you look at the top of the map, all of that was zoned differently before to South Knoll. That would go over to Riverbend as well. So there's some big adjustments there. Look at Rock Prairie Elementary. They typically stop right at Harvey Parkway, but it is going to go ahead and extend all up. And so it'll pick up those 2 groups of kids that were zoned to other elementaries. So when you look at this map, there's a lot of adjustments, but When you looked at our original map, we had pieces pulled out of the attendance zones and moved all the way to another elementary school. So we eliminated a lot of that here because we feel like it would be best for transportation and transporting the kids. Creekview Elementary would include area across Highway 6 as previously referenced, but a larger portion of Southwood Valley. So it picks up a huge portion of Southwood Valley in this one. In addition, when you look down at Forest Ridge, they cross over and pick up a large portion of Pebble Creek. Those are the elementary boundary adjustments that we're proposing. Are there any questions about the one so far? Okay, I'll move on to intermediate. This is where it gets a little tricky. This is our current boundary as it sits today. Our first look was right in middle school as well. I think I want you to look at something real quick though, because you can look at Cypress Grove, Oakwood, and Pecan Trail. And what we did up there is we put the percentage of economically disadvantaged kids. That's what you're seeing at the top of the map. And then you can also look at the boundaries where we're over at Pecan Trail and we're a little high at Oakwood. So those are the ones we really kind of wanted to balance out. But those are the same attendance zones that flow into this one, but our numbers are different. So if you look again at the economically disadvantaged percentage, they don't follow what you saw on the previous, even though they're the same feeder. Does that make sense? They adjust a little. And then the same thing with the students. It's like your students don't completely go up because you've got that dual language campus that's mixed in there. Here is the Plan 3 that we put together. There's just small adjustments to it. It basically takes Castlegate and puts it in Cypress Grove. And you can kind of see that at the bottom. And then what it does to the fluctuation of the numbers. It still has Oakwood a little high. So we built another plan to try to balance out the numbers. This is the middle school, and you can kind of see the numbers associated with it. And then here is intermediate, and this was our fourth plan that we looked at. It balances out the numbers a little bit better, gets Pecan Trail a little high, but it picks up Pecan Trail, Cypress Grove, would pick up Mission Ranch. They would pick up Greens Prairie Reserve and Castlegate. So there's some big adjustments there. But if you look at the percentage at the top of economically disadvantaged kids, it kind of balances out that a little bit more. And then, of course, this is the middle school plan on that version. Are there any questions? Okay. So our next steps, and I'll let Dr. Harkrider weigh in here for sure, our next steps would be to survey the community, and then we're hoping to develop, adopt the changes in November.
Sorry, when?
By November.
Official changes would be November. What we do is put this out for community input online in a Google document, so you can comment however you would like to. We take those comments, come back. You're going to get all kinds of feedback back, but sometimes you get some really good thought processes or things potentially we hadn't thought about. We'd come back and bring you kind of the core group of suggestions. If we make any changes to boundaries based on those suggestions, have a look at that. More than likely August, at the latest September, put that back out again for additional input, and we'd like it finalized by November, because we've got an entire rest of the fall semester into the spring to get prepped and planned for staffing and adjustments to enrollment at campuses. Just a few things to remember based on current lines, especially at the elementary level. There's some nuances of things up northeast part of town. For travel standpoint, doesn't make a lot of sense. So Plan 4 is more changes, but it's more succinct and makes a bigger difference, especially with bus transportation and mobility back and forth. The board policy on the 10 to 15%. I understand the policy. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be in policy. It could be in our regulations. But you have to realize here over the next 10 years, just like 10 years prior to, as the dynamics of our city change, to try to keep those percentages in line, you're going to have attendance boundaries that aren't going to make any sense. as far as transportation and mobility, because if you're trying to get neighborhoods that are aging neighborhoods that are now more lower income than what they were 20 years ago, it's not going to look like it does now. And so trying to keep those percentages intact, totally understand that. But I'm just telling you logistically, 10 and 15 years from now, your lines aren't going to make a lot of sense because the city's going to change. And so that's just something to keep in mind. We'll continue to do whatever you guys want us to do. But if we get questions of why is this here, why is it there, well, you're trying to stay inside the percentage pieces. And that's kind of where we're closer on the middle school than the intermediate. So we just need some feedback from you guys. We'll get it back from the community and figure out kind of where we want to go. But the board policy, in my opinion, moving forward is going to be problematic in the next 10 years.
Yes, I have a couple comments and a question. But I guess on what you just talked about on the FC local, I was not on the board when that was determined. It was in my window when I was off, but I supported it. I think the way it came about was that at the time our community really said that that was an important part of how we set the attendance boundaries. And not only because we want every school here to have every chance of being successful, but also I think the impact of what people have seen in other cities sometimes, where you do start to have an area where one school is, the very wealthy school, and then another school is not, and how that can start to become a self-fulfilling problem in affecting the whole community. So I think it is something that I think we still need to have on our consideration list, because I think it's personally important, and I think our community, at least has said it's important. And I think the other thing, I mean, we have the example of our two high schools, and you say it many times too, Dr. Harkrider, is that, those could not be any closer on capacity or their socioeconomic levels right now, right? And I think we see that it was very painful, but we see both high schools being so successful in so many different ways. So I mean, I think it's still something we really need to take as part of the conversation. And that's my opinion on that. Other two important, I think, things we need to think about. Well, one, I'm glad we're opening up for the feedback, of course. I'd even offer as far as saying that we may need to have like a couple of sessions where we sit down with pieces of paper in front of people for people to really ask those specific questions. Where is that line? What street is that? And because it's hard to see these and gather feedback on something like that. Especially obviously the schools that are going to be more affected. And then the other question I think we have to figure out what we're going to do is grandfathering. Right? And I don't know if y'all have talked about it at all or what you would propose for grandfathering, but I think nobody's excited about changing a campus, right? Whether they don't want to change schools. So figuring out what our rules are going to be for family members, or a second grader at an elementary school. I mean, I think that's going to be an important part of this discussion as well.
Yeah, grandfathering would be a decision the board would have to make. It's much easier to grandfather intermediate and middle school students versus elementary. The issue also with grandfathering, if we want to go, hey, we want to grandfather and whatever the protocols would have to be, that would not include transportation. So once those boundaries are changed, we can't run different routes based on picking up this kid here wants to stay at Spring Creek. All of the rest of them are good with leaving. That's an impossible task. So the grandfathering would be possible with parents providing transportation.
I think that's how we've done
it. The transportation piece would have to change immediately, so it would become problematic, especially probably more potentially at the elementary level as well, because now you've got 5 grade levels or 4 grade levels that you're impacting versus a couple. So there's just some things that we'd have to consider. I think that's something else that we could gather input from the community and parents as well. I like the online solicitation as far as feedback, because trying to have one meeting on one night and expect people to be able to make it there, it's probably not feasible. We're available to answer the questions, and I think part of putting these out is kind of a summary that kind of Heather read through of the roads affected, the neighborhoods affected, and us dig down into the details to make sure that that's readily available, and then our staff would be available as well to answer questions.
And I was not suggesting we give up the online means of feedback, and I think we all should be welcoming any feedback we can get on this.
Is November, I know there's a lot of practicalities involved. Is that really the earliest that this decision could be made? Because I guess getting back to kind of this grandfather, the earlier the better.
We want to make sure we're not rushing the process.
Yeah.
I think's the biggest deal. And then the other part is to make sure logistically we have enough time for transportation to rework routes for 26, 27, us rework staffing, because we've got to have projections of, all right, now we're going to have 80 kids leave this campus to go here. Teachers have to move with those kids. So we've got to have enough time. I think, to me, November would be the latest.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at. If it's
That was my,
sooner-
that would be my drop dead date.
Okay.
If we could potentially get it done in October, that would be great too. I think a lot of it would depend on feedback and what we're getting. You know, once you get down to it, we can manipulate lines a million different ways. I think kind of what we talked about before, we try to stay intermediate and middle school within the 10 to 15% if we can. Get that as close as we possibly can to make that happen. And then at that point in time, there's only slight adjustments that we're going to be able to make. The other big one too in the elementary is, like I said, Plan 4 is more, or is it Plan 4 or 5?
Elementary?
Yes, 5 was the bigger cleanup. 5 was the bigger cleanup. I mean, there's more adjustments there, but it's cleaner from a transportation line standpoint. It makes a little bit more sense and takes us out to a pretty good picture over the next 6 years.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
other
this
thing
is-
with Plan 5, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but there was still one more pocket up top. So there's this little piece right here that you can see that's in College Hills that actually goes all the way down to Forest Ridge. But then when you look at Pebble Creek and Forest Ridge, that could be switched back later on as they grow. So it would be least amount of adjustments later.
Yeah.
They might last, the boundaries might last more than 6 years. Sorry for interrupting.
I would say, you know, obviously this is something that absolutely has to be done to use the resources of the district most efficiently, and to honestly make it more fair for our principals and teachers and other administrators at these campuses that are blowing up. Yeah, and I understand the socioeconomic balancing and so forth, but you know, as we go through this process, I would just ask the board to think about the individual kid who is on a bus for an hour a day, both way, you know, 2 hours a day, so forth. The parent who has got to drive from the College Hills area down to Forest Ridge. It's, you know, there's no easy answers like a lot of things, but that hard and fast socioeconomic rule might be something we want to look at, just at least at the elementary level, and you know, because there's a lot of that kind of.
Well, it's not in the policy for the elementary levels, right? So we're not even looking at it for elementary levels, which I think, because I think that was kind of the idea, is that the elementary schools can and should be more of a neighborhood school. So maybe the Plan 5 and kind of cleaning up some of that maybe makes sense. But at the intermediate on up is where it's in the policy.
Yeah, but I'm pretty certain some of these changes at the elementary on the northeast part had everything to do with EcoDis. Yeah.
I think that's the issue that we're running into, because FC Local, I think, was 2012. Since then, we've put in 5 new schools. So a lot's changed in College Station ISD since that policy was put into play. I agree with you, Josh, on transportation piece of it. I agree 100%. I mean, the online feedback, I think, is going to be key. Everybody's going to reply back how it bases for their family and their kids, and that's how it should be, because it's going to give us an idea. Again, us sitting up here, We gotta look at all 14,000. We gotta look at all 19 campuses. Well, in this case, all 16 campuses. But just the hardship on that, it is what it is. But not gonna lie, looking at this for the second time today, my head hurts, and that's fine. But it's supposed to, because there's a whole lot of lines and there's a whole lot of colors, and I've zoomed in to 240%, and I know College Station pretty well. And I've got an idea of how these are, but I'm probably going to get what I used in high school, those transparent overlays, and try to do that. I'll probably get with my parents on how to do that, but because I need to see that in that regard, so that I can see where we're at now, throw an overlay over it, kind of go from there. It'll just help me personally try to figure this out, but I will be curious to see the feedback we get, because I think that's going to be imperative and kind of help us grow and understand, because we don't want to make it difficult. That's not the goal. The goal is to make it make sense, and for some it will and some it won't. But in the end, like with our high schools, here we are, and it's made sense. Like there's equal number of kids, everything kind of lines up, all that. So it's going to be a struggle. I like November, the end all be all date, but I'm with you, Mr. Ben, and you too, Dr. Harker. If we can get it done sooner, it just helps everybody going forward. So if they need to, hate to say it, figure out where to move because they don't like where it is or something like that, but hopefully we won't have to put people in that position.
We can also get with Zonda on, because I know they've done this, if we're putting out these for feedback, what depictions can they come up with on a map to be able to show that clearly of the differences? And so we can work with them to make sure that we get that as user-friendly as possible.
Or for Mr. Horak, we could dig up an old overhead projector.
I will put together an overlay party,
Yeah.
and we'll meet up here one night.
That's,
Well,
I will tell you, I did a quick read just through our board policy, just so you guys are aware. If you're kind of outside of the percentages, then the administration shall make recommendations to the board about the actions to be taken, if any, to address. So we need to have a conversation about it, is basically kind of how I'm interpreting that. It's not hard, fast. If we say, hey, we don't have suggestions based on transportation and the lines aren't going to make a lot of sense, yada, yada. So there is a little wiggle room there, at least to have the conversation and then make a decision on what to do.
Well, and to that point, one of the things that I think is really important is that our intermediate and middle school boundaries are the same boundaries. You know, if you go to Pecan Trail, you go to Wellborn. If you go to Cypress Grove, you go to CSI. Generally, that's how our lines are drawn now. And so they kind of have a 4-year school in a way instead of a 2-year school. And so I think it's just hard, for the reasons you said earlier, for those numbers to work out perfectly. But they get a lot better when you look at the middle school boundaries that you're proposing. So while I think it's important for us to look at, I do think there's got to be some wiggle room to do what makes sense for our kids too.
Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That'll bring us to J1, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to the 25-26 employee compensation plan. Ms. Wilson.
Okay, so I have 6 plans laid out to make this as easy as possible. Just a second. Not very easy when I'm going to start D to F, but let's start with common plans D to F. No, I'm not going to do that to you. I've got to start with A to C. I'm sorry, I'm OCD. Okay, so so if you look at common plans to A through C, what you're going to see is that House Bill 2 raises for classroom teachers are the $2,500 if they have 3 or 4 years of experience, and then of course $5,000 for 5 years of experience or over, and then $2,500 base pay increase for all other employees. So that would be $25 base pay for all those that do not qualify as a classroom teacher, and that would be an additional $2,500 for years 1 and 2. Okay, and then beginning teacher pay would move from $51,750 to $52,250, and continuation of the teacher incentive allotment, and then market-based adjustments on a few positions. If you look at the bottom, it kind of just summarizes what that means, because if you take the top and then you apply to the other pay families, so there's 3 additional pay families. That is your administrative pay family, your clerical paraprofessional pay family, as well as your auxiliary pay family. So if you applied a 3% raise, it would be 5,886, 588, 6,415, 766 for a 4% raise, and 842, 598 for a 5% raise. It just got really good. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this right here. So this is kind of just a look at the summary that we just went over. When you do apply those, you can look at the deficit budget at the bottom. So House Bill 2 deficit with raise, you can kind of look at those different deficits that A, B, or C would attribute to. Okay, do I have any questions so far? Okay, so this is D, E, and F. So sorry that these slides are out of whack. Okay, so D, E, and F, what we've done here is the House Bill 2 raises for everybody on the teacher pay scale would be the same. So if you are 1 to 4 years of experience, you're going to get a $2,500 pay increase. If you have 5 years or more and you're on the teacher pay scale, you're going to get $5,000 a year for the year. Okay, beginning teacher pay again is the same, $51,750 to $52,250. Same thing for TIA and the same adjustments. These are your plan amounts for D, E, and F. So then what we would do is do a 3% of midpoint would be $6,167,234. 4% of midpoint would be $6,696,412. And if we did a 5% of midpoint, it would be $7,123,044. The amount contributed to the district that we have to spend is a little over $4 million that we would have to spend on a raise per House Bill 2. Do I have any questions?
You go.
Go through the next slide after this. That's D through F. There you go. All right, go ahead, Jeff.
So, from our Friday meeting, we had HB2 teachers qualifying for the HB2 amount, 2,500 or 5,000, correct? So we had then. Then we had all other teachers, nurses, and all that, and we were lumping everybody that wasn't under HB2 into a 5% raise. But now, we've changed to now say all those other teachers, nurses, librarians, everybody that is on the teacher scale is now going to also get HB2 amount instead of the 5%. Is that the change kind of?
Well, the change was if you didn't qualify for House Bill 2, you got the greater of 5,000 or the percentage.
Right.
And then we went back and looked at it and we made the adjustments to follow it exactly.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
those that are on 1 and 2, we went ahead and gave them the 2,500.
Gotcha. Okay.
We wanted to keep the scale. There's some districts that are taking all the non-teachers off of the teacher scale or a scale like that and going to a mid-max.
Right.
I personally think it's cleaner because that's how those folks have been paid many times for 20 plus years. What we would do is create a teacher scale as TEA has formed teachers, and then everybody else that was on that teacher scale will be on a different scale.
Right.
Our recommendation is that they be the exact same.
Okay.
2,500, 5,000, depending on experience,
Okay.
but we'll just run 2 different scales. Scales are the same, but if we ever had to pull those out for whatever's going on with TEA or new legislation, we technically have 2 different scales.
Okay.
Yeah, but they would be paid the same. And our recommendation, we've talked about this, Heather and I have cabinet, we talked about it last Friday. Our recommendation is that you approve Plan F, which is what we just talked about, in a 5% of midpoint for all other employees. We have an opportunity to be aggressive. We have an opportunity, we've asked every department, every principal to tighten things up, to work more efficiently with less staff. And in my opinion, if we're going to ask them to do that, then we need to step up and pay them. And we have an opportunity to close some scales that we've received feedback, especially our hourly folks that are well below the average in a market that they've got other places that they can work. And if we move that midpoint 5%, we're giving them a lot of reasons to stay here with us. I understand it's a deficit, but I have no heartburn proposing a $2.1 million deficit when all that money's going to our staff. I don't think it could go to a better place.
I personally, I think we've talked about this a lot. This is one of the things as a school board that we actually do get to make a decision on. I know there's a lot that people think we do that we really don't. And so I personally would like to make a motion to adopt Plan F with the 5% raise.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Simmons and a second by Ms. Ege. Any further question or comment?
So I agree with Dr. Harkrider's statement that this is the best place if we're going to spend the money to spend it. I guess what I would like to know is, you talked about it a little bit at the workshop, but in relation to the fund balance, where that kind of leaves us.
Okay, so in relationship to the fund balance, you're looking at unassigned fund balance. Right now, we're sitting at 38 million unassigned fund balance. If you look at the current, and our board policy says 3 months. If you look at the current expenditure budget that we're posing tonight, we would need about 39 million. We do estimate when we close this fiscal year out, because we're doing a 10-month fiscal year, that we will put about 6 million into fund balance. And so what that basically does, it gives us about a couple of years to be able to reverse the deficit, so that we would have to work hard to continue to look to be efficient and then come up with ways to do that.
So you'd add 6, you'd take 2 away from this next year. So going into the year before the next legislative session, you'd be sitting 4 in the positive. We see what happens that session. You know, our team has been here 2 years now. We've gotten much tighter on how we're spending money. We shaved out close to $3 million this cycle. There's not $3 million for next cycle. However, there are some one-time expenditures that Heather said that were big expenditures for this year that we won't have next year. Our team's getting more efficient. And so I do think there's some more trimming potentially that we could do. You know, the other part is, the unknown of 26, 27, when vouchers become a fair game, of how that's going to affect us. And that's something we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But I know the one thing we can't happen is have employees shopping. Our kids achieve at high levels because of the folks that we put around them each and every day, and they want to be here. Many have stayed here when they could have made money other places, but they want to be here, and just give them a reason to stay.
And I guess just to maybe play devil's advocate, 3 things. Number one is, I know the administration has tightened the belt, like you said, quite a bit. But at some point, there's no more belt tightening to be done. And so that's number one. Number 2 is, we just went through a period where we had, 20-something% inflation over the last 5 years. And part of our budget problems have come from that, and that could happen again. And then lastly, looking at it as, hey, we've got 2 years to do this, I guess because of my lack of faith in the legislature, when we get to that end of that 2-year period, and now we're at the point of the fund balance is at or below where it needs to be. That's just, there's part of me that's like, are we playing with fire a little too much?
Well, I think the trump card that we have that we currently don't do as a school district, once we rezone this next year, enrollment's flat. We're losing a few kids. The only way we make more money is we have more kids. So as a district, once we got numbers stabilized of where everyone is, we could explore the option of taking out of district transfers. And out of district transfers is how you're going to make more money, plain and simple. For us to make money, we've got to have more kids. And so if the growth's not here, and it's not right now, because median housing market here is $350,000, so we're not getting new families. But I would dare say we are an extremely attractive options. And I think, in my opinion, when vouchers come to play, we open up an out-of-district transfer window. And that's how you close the gap. And you could actually run a surplus, in my opinion, because you could decide we're going to take whatever, 250 elementary kids, however you wanted to break it down. And you've got new numbers, they're fresh, we know the capacities, and open up a window, close a window, and then you got plenty of time to staff it.
So we do have capacity.
That would be the only way to generate additional money without help. And I 100% agree with you. I don't think we can rely on the 90th session. I think we'd have to explore other options. And I would say also, with out-of-district transfers, there would be criteria to meet. It would not be an open enrollment. It would be criteria of grades, discipline, STAR scores, attendance, all of those things. We would set a criteria as a school district. You meet those criteria, you apply, and we decide if you're accepted or not. It's no different than what private schools are doing with the vouchers.
Well, and I think there's probably not one of us sitting here that doesn't have some heartburn about, running this deficit budget. I certainly do. I think we're in a position to be able to take a calculated risk in a way because we're going to be putting money back in our fund balance from doing the 10-month budget. And I just think it's the situation that we're in too, where maybe politically it looks like we're giving teachers or the state's giving teachers a huge raise this year. That's what you might hear, but they're leaving a lot of people out. So we have, we talked about it in workshop, and that's why I asked Ms. Wilson to say, hey, who are some of these, employees that are in these other buckets that we have to act on to be able to give them raises as well. And so it's not something that's easy to do, to sit here and vote on a deficit budget, but I think it's something that is important.
Yeah, this is exactly what the struggle is, right? It's the struggle between, I think all of us would like, we recognize and would like to compensate the people who do work every day and to do it as fairly as we can under the, the guardrails that the state has given us. I mean, because just to give some raises to everyone else, all of our scenarios are deficit budgets. That's so it's a tough situation. And we have had deficit budgets in the past, but I think just like your first thing, your comments are all in line. We have tightened a lot of money, almost $3 million, right? This year. You can't, I'm worried that we can't continue to find that. And I think you said the number because we're going to increase our budget this year, some of it because the state is, giving us the teacher raises. So we're actually going to need to increase our fund balance from where it is today, from the 38 or almost 38 to 39. So we're only going to end up with about 5 million. It's not very many, it's not much time at all. It's not 3 years, right? So that's the dilemma, right? It's between funding the people who do the work and the unknowns of what's going to happen in those 2 years. We know 2 years what's going to happen pretty much. It's what's going to happen after that.
You can eliminate a deficit budget without a district transfers. Period. You could run a surplus. Yeah.
You feel confident that's where we'd get it?
I feel confident if we opened up out-of-district transfers with criteria, we would turn people away. Yes.
And obviously, there's more expenses that come with that as well, but you're right, it's the only way we can.
Only way we can generate more, the only way we have any control of our current situation financially is more kids. And the only way you can do that is have out-of-district transfers. Otherwise, you're waiting on a demographer's report in year 8 or 9. All of a sudden, we're going to start getting more kids. I don't think anything's going to change over the next 7 years with our current market. Bryan College Station is an expensive place to live. It's going to continue to be that way. It's got its pros and cons when you need student growth. For us, it's not super beneficial, but we've also got a great product as a school district that people want to be a part of. And to me, it's we're not going to have a choice. And to me, it's a win-win. We reward our staff. We open up out-of-district transfers, have that conversation, get feedback from staff, start putting that together. And then if we wanted to run it 27, 28, or we run it for the year 26, 27, and run it in line with school vouchers.
And I agree, it's a risk and it makes me nervous as a business owner, but I think it's also the shot in the arm that our teachers and staff need right now. And when you look at the plans between E and F, there's about a $400,000 difference, and that's really pennies on the dollar when you're looking at the grand scheme of things. And I also have confidence in Heather and all, she's been in these numbers. I don't even know how you probably sleep at night with all the numbers we're calculating. And
She doesn't sleep very much.
I don't think she would have presented us an option that she would have thought would have put our district in peril, my personal opinion.
Be the largest kind of across the board raise that we've done in
According
decade.
to Austin's research, it'd be the largest in the last 15 years of just the district's money, without a TRE or something else that the percentage might have been a tiny bit higher. Yes, sir. Because in essence, the teachers, with the $5,000, everybody on that teacher pay scale with that $5,000 potentially, that's closer to a 7 to 8% raise versus 5, depending on where they fall on that scale.
Point, one more comment to Heather's point. Yeah, I know it's the difference between like running out of money in 2.8 years or running out of money in 2.3 years. So between those plans, and I'm certainly not saying no raise. It's just where's the right amount, and it just makes me quite nervous about going into this level of a deficit budget at this point. But I think it's just what we have to do, right?
I'm not gonna say this for a soundbite, at all, but obviously, yes, fiscally responsible. Yeah, probably should make everybody nervous. Sat on this board for 5.5 years. We've adopted a deficit every year. 2.1 doesn't make me nervous. That's just me, y'all. Heather Wilson probably hates me for saying that, and I apologize. But I mean, I'm looking at one here right now, 2.6 million. I'm looking at another one, 2.9 million, and these are finals. These weren't proposed.
But let me ask you this question though, Mr.
Yep.
Rack. How many, and I hate to even bring it into the air, so to speak, but the COVID federal dollars saved our butt.
But we still adopted negative budgets.
Yeah, but then the COVID money is what
Right.
kept us, yeah. And, you know, we don't even want to,
I just,
and I don't,
I
hopefully that
mean-
doesn't happen again.
no, I get it. We don't know. We didn't know COVID was going to hit. So, but that's where I go. We don't know what 2 years looks like either. And if I'm still sitting here in 2 years, then I'll deal with it as a board member. But I refuse to not support the 5%, and I dang sure refuse to not give it to everybody in our district because it's not right. Our legislature and our reps as freshmen did what they could, and they listened, and they talked, and they responded, and they did what they could, and that's all we can ask. It changed from what we thought was what it was going to be, and it went better than what we had when we woke up the morning before when it was real bad. But to short sight everybody that wasn't included under the teacher deal, it's not right. It doesn't bode well with me. There's nothing I can do about it at this point, but all I can do is say for CSISD, I can make sure that at least those folks, and this, y'all, I say it all the time. I'm a product of educators. I grew up in it. I still live in it. It's never enough. It's never enough. If we paid teachers as much as we pay pro athletes, it'd be a whole different ballgame. We all know that. But it's never enough. But this is something, like you said, we have not done. We've never done 5%. It's always been 1, 2, nickels and dimes here. So, I appreciate the motion on the floor. I'm gonna support it all day long. And we'll let the cards fall. I get it, y'all. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it doesn't make sense. Like we were talking about, pennies on the dollar between Plan E and Plan F, if we're looking at those two. And I know it's easy to say that right now, but in the grand scheme of things, that's kind of how I look at it.
Well, and I would feel a whole lot differently if we weren't in a position where we were about to put money into our fund balance. I mean, and I didn't sit on the board in some of the years that you guys are talking about with those budgets. And, fortunately, things happened that helped the district out in those situations. I don't know that we can worry about that for this decision. I mean, right now, we're sitting here, this is where we are. This is the decision we're faced with. And again, I don't think that I would feel the same way if we weren't about to put money into our fund balance from this 10-month cycle that we've run. And so I feel like that has helped us to be in a place to be able to do this. And I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years any more than the rest of you guys. And I think there are going to be some hard decisions to make. But we aren't in a situation right now where we're closing down schools. We aren't in a situation right now where we're laying off teachers. We're in a situation, I believe, where we can try to do what we can to give raises that should have been happening in all these years that we're talking about and has kind of not been able to keep up with inflation and everything else. And it's probably still not enough, but it's what we can do.
So let me ask this question in regard to the change in our fiscal year. And I think I've said this several times, but despite the best efforts of my math teachers, I fell off the math train way too early. The increase in the fund balance as a result, and that's probably not even correct, but as a result of the change in the fiscal year, what's the end result of that on the back end next year? Would we end up having a smaller?
And I think that's why we presented all along a 12. That's why I wanted you to see a 12-month budget, because
Yeah.
the 12-month budget was a $5 million deficit. So a 10-month budget, no, it's not. It's a one-time infusion into fund balance. If you're looking at it cash basis, then it's no more money. But if you're looking at a fund balance, yes, it is. For accounting purposes, it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Depending on how the year were, I mean, right now, we're looking at potentially $2.1 million deficit. Depending on how things shake out next year, deficit may not be 2.1. It could be less than 2.1. It could technically be a little more, depending on, conditions and weather and stuff like that. So it's a pretty solid number, but the number could also go down.
All right. We got a motion on the floor, I believe, just to recap for Plan F. There's no further discussion or question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I think you're staying up there. J2, consideration and possible adoption of the 25-26 General Fund, Food Services, and Debt Service Fund budgets as presented in public hearing. Ms. Wilson.
Sure. So we went through a public workshop earlier tonight. Just to recap, we have to legally adopt a child nutrition, debt service, and general fund budget. So just looking at the child nutrition budget, yes, we had to decrease the revenue and expenditures on that budget due to the fact that we did lose some federal funding due to COVID. Ms. Goodlett did a great job of kind of going through and seeing where she could cut expenditures. We did not increase the cost for a meal. And because of that, we're going to watch this very, very closely, and hopefully the next year we'll have to evaluate that to see how we land. But right now we're holding strong with the same meal cost that we had in the previous year, which I'm very, very proud of her for doing that. Great job. But it is 9.799684 for proposed and 9,799,684 for the expenditure side. Debt service, as we talked tonight, this doesn't really look absolutely accurate, but it is. And it is due to the fact that our payment for August of 2025 is actually $3 million higher than our payment for August of 2026. And because we're collecting revenue on one set of numbers and expensing on another set of numbers, and even another set of numbers on your summary of finance, it rolls out to be a $2 million deficit. That is because we had to take the money that we saved for collecting this previous year. We're not going to make that August payment that we collect on. That money goes into our fund balance, and then we pull it out for that August payment. So it's a little confusing, but that's our world now. But because of that, we have a revenue that we would like to adopt tonight of $45,439,419 and expenditures of $47,565,662 with a deficit budget in our debt service account by $2,126,243. Again, that's money that we wrote into fund balance and we have set aside for that payment. It just happens to hit a different fiscal year. General fund proposed budget, we're proposing a revenue of $156,003,535, expenditures of $158,170,268, uses of $4,000. That's just to pay for that additional insurance for a total deficit of $2,177,33. This is based on how we understand House Bill 2 at this time, and there could be some adjustments that we have in September and August of this year. Okay. Are there any questions? If there are no questions or concerns, it's the administrative recommendation to adopt the budget as proposed for 25-26.
I move that we adopt the proposed budget for the 25-26 year as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. McAdams, second by Ms. Ms. Simmons. Any further questions or comment?
Can you go back one slide real quickly? Just another thank you to the administration, and I said this at the budget workshop too, not just to the administration, but for finding the cuts and the campuses for saving the $3 million, so you know that this isn't any worse of a deficit budget than it is. And I said that then too, because that I know it's gonna be hard on some people, right? In some places, although some of it was really needed saving, and then some was, you know, some people are gonna have to, some things are gonna be cut in some positions. So I am glad that we are able to give it back to the teachers, the majority of this money, and all of that, all those little bits have helped. So I'm glad we're able to make it happen.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Brings us all the way to K1. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Consider approval of the purchase over $50,000 for commissioning the Rock Prairie addition / renovation project. Mr. Buckner.
All right, mine hopefully will be easy. So y'all know we're doing an addition renovation project at Rock Prairie Elementary. It is all new building controls. We're getting new chillers. We're getting some new HVAC in there. And part of that is commissioning and testing and balance. Commissioning kind of ensures that the building is intended and meets the design guidelines and our owner requirements for the building to operate efficiently. And testing and balance ensures that the HVAC system is operating efficiently and as it is designed as well, and the best methods possible. So this is to have that building commissioned during the project and at the end of the project to ensure that it is one of our more efficient ones in the district, and carry that through to the other buildings eventually as well. But this is going to be through Green Star Engineering. They are a local engineering firm located here in Bryan College Station. They do a lot of school district work, especially in the Houston area, and he is very intelligent in this realm. And the cost for this that he has given us is $88,625 for this work, and it is funded through the 2023 bond as part of the Rock Prairie project.
I move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Simmons, second by Ms. Ege. Any further comment or question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Buckner.
Thanks.
That will bring us to the end. Adjourned. Thank y'all for being here.